Muted.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Language and the Pursuit of Happiness. This is one in a series of webinars where we connect for 30 minutes to bring to life the challenges we see in the market and what we do about them. During this section, RICHI, one of Action's founding members and Chief Culture Officer, will guide us through a discussion around how language influences the way we think about and behave, how it can empower us and have more constructive conversations. He will help us understand what levers can create a culture where people can thrive in the pursuit of their dreams that at the same time further the purpose of the business. We will host a Q&A at the end of the session. So if you have any questions that come up during the presentation, feel free to use the question application and we will answer them later in the call. So off to you, RICHI.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbie. I was muted. Well, hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's a real pleasure to be here. Well, as Barbie said, the purpose of this presentation is to offer you some ideas on the power of distinctions. I will spend some time talking about language and distinctions and stories we tell ourselves about how the world operates and then how we take action in it. Then I will move into language and effectiveness, how a different perspective or filter through which we look at the world can create a totally different language in conversations. And since we live in language and we live in conversations, hopefully this can become a lever for you to become more effective having conversations and enter with a different perspective to them. And then ultimately I will end by offering you some ideas on how you can translate that in a company into the lever, the performance, the fundamental performance lever in a company, which is a team, how you can translate this different awareness about language and conversations into some operating principles that can help teams become much more effective, have a great time, create a culture of mutual support and solidarity, and ultimately live happier lives at work and beyond. So this is the purpose of the webinar today. So in the invitation it said language and the pursuit of happiness. I love this. This is a title of a book by Chalmers brothers, and it speaks about happiness and language. And I love to start with this quote from Aristotle, that happiness is the ultimate meaning and purpose of life. The whole aim and of human existence. So if you ask anybody, why do you do what you do, or what do you pursue what you pursue, at the bottom, most of us would say, well, because I want to be happy, I want to live a happy life. So let me start by offering a possible definition. Nothing of what I'm going to say is the truth. It's just a possible interpretation of the truth that can allow you to intervene in the world. So this is a definition of happiness that I like a lot, which is happiness is a combination of a factor of well-being at the being level precisely, and then a factor of accomplishment or productivity at the doing level. So there is a being element of happiness, which has to do precisely with this peacefulness, a state of mind, and then there is a doing part of happiness that has to do with your ability to intervene and to pursue and accomplish results that you desire. This presentation is going to focus more on the doing part of happiness, which is sometimes undervalued, and I think there is a lot to be done here. So first point of the agenda today, the power of distinctions. Let me start with a story. I think as humans relate well to stories, and as Ken Wilber used to say, the universe is not made of atoms, the universe is made of stories. So we relate well to stories. So let me start with a little story. So imagine you raise the hood of your car and look inside. This would be something that you would see and ask, well, what do you see? You know, some people will say an engine, some people will don't even know what that is. Some people will have, will be able to make up the battery that's showing up there, or there are some cables showing up. There seem to be some recipients that hold liquid, etc., etc. And probably what you will do next is close the hood and call your friend the mechanic to come and help you. That's what we would normally do, because we don't have enough distinctions to do anything about it. Now, your friend the mechanic comes, and when he looks into under the hood of the car, he sees a totally different picture. This is a possible picture he would see. He would see the throttle, whether it's in position or not, the intake air temperature, the coolant of the engine, the injection, the filters, etc., etc. He has some distinctions that you or I or most of the people do not have. The thing is that your friend, the mechanic, will be able to intervene in that system in a totally different way than you are able to intervene. Actually, you or I are not able to intervene, and he is able because he has distinctions that we don't have. Or, second story, imagine tonight, wherever you are in the world, is a clear night, a beautiful sky, and you go out and you look up. So what do you see? Well, most people, when asked this question in our workshops or seminars, they would say, well, I see a bunch of stars. And that is true, you see a bunch of stars. Until, you find Johnny, who is your friend and is also happens to be, an astronomer. So he tells you about the stars, that in the skies, there are not only stars. There are, constellations, there is nebula, that is clouds of stars, many of them that are extinguished thousands or millions of years ago, and we still see them. And also, there are planets in the sky, which you can distinguish by their reddish or greenish color, if you pay attention. And also in the sky, there are satellites. Some satellites are geostationary, so they turn together with the Earth, but then others, if you pay attention, you can see them orbiting slowly across the sky. And your friend tells you all those stories. So my promise to you is that tonight, when you go again and look up at the sky, you are going to see a different sky. You're going to see a different sky because now you have distinctions that you did not have before. So I hope by now you can see that the distinctions are everything. The classic belief around language is that there is a world out there and we talk about it. So we talk about what's out there. Well, I want to start totally debunking that idea that we speak about what's out there. I want to claim that we can only see out there that we can talk about. It's like in the example of the engine or the example of the sky, you can only see what you can talk about. Before you had a language for it, you could not see it. It was not part of your perception. So what I want to claim here is that the more powerful those distinctions are, the more ability we have to intervene. Just like I said before, your friend the mechanic or your friend the astronomer can do things in that system that we cannot do. And the more ability to intervene, the more you can produce the results you wish for in your lives. I know it's common sense, but like many of the things we do, it's not common practice. So let me move. and speak a little bit about awareness. Um, I want to invite all of us in this presentation to flex a little bit the witness eye, you know, or the big eye, the eye that is capable of observing ourselves. This is a big difference between human beings and the rest of the species. You know, species or animals, they can feel emotions, they can be afraid, they can be happy, but they cannot speak or see themselves being happy like us human beings have. We have the capacity of self-awareness. So I want to invite all of us to flex a little bit that witness eye and look at ourselves having and building stories. This is a hypothesis of how we go about in the world. You know, we do basically three things. We see an event or something happens, or you know, somebody tells us something, and we make up a story about that event. That is what we always do. We make a story. But then the second thing we do, which starts to become problematic, is we believe the story. Well, why do we believe it? Well, because it's ours. And then if it's ours, it must be right. But then the third thing, and this is what causes the most trouble and gets us in trouble over and over and over again, is that we forget we told ourselves a story. So we tell a story about something, we hold the story to be true because it's ours, and then we forget we told ourselves a story. So we go around the world looking at it through filters of perception, filters that create a picture for us that is part of a story that has certain distinctions and does not have certain other distinctions because we know what we know and we have the language that we have. So these filters of the world condition what we can see out there, like we said before, and of course our capacity to take action in the world. We call these filters mindsets or mental models or paradigms. I mean, whatever name you want to call them, they create a possibility to intervene in the world that is determined by those filters. On the one hand, they save energy for us because if we had to figure it all out every time we wake up in the morning, we wouldn't be able to get out of bed. But the problem is that they have also created stories that condition us in accomplishing the results we desire for our lives. So I want, as I said before, invite us to consider some possibilities of given the world we're living in. You know, you've heard this. You've heard about the VUCA world. You know, the world being every day more volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. So in the face of this world, which is here to stay, is not here to leave. It will be with us, and it will be worse and worse and more VUCA world every day that passes. Then in this world, questions become more critical than answers. Now, if questions become more critical than answers, this is totally counterintuitive with the way we have been educated, you know, through school, the college, university, and at work. We have been rewarded for having the right answers. And the problem that the answers we give are conditioned by the distinctions we have and by what we can see. If we believe that what I said before is true, we can only talk about what we can see out there. And then if we cannot see certain things, we don't have the capacity to intervene and therefore to accomplish the results we desire in our lives. So I want to invite all of us to enter a space of questions and curiosity rather than answers and certainty. Now, for this, we have to exercise, like I said before, the witness eye. So let's talk a little bit about the witness eye. When we look at ourselves, we can, you know, we can see ourselves paying more attention to, you know, having the right answers to the questions. As I said before, this is what we have been rewarded all along our careers, or by remembering and becoming aware and noticing, noticing that we are conditioned. We are conditioned by our physiology. We are conditioned by our history. We are conditioned by our stories. We are conditioned by our culture. We are sometimes so arrogant that we say, well, for example, dogs, they hear ultrasound. And dogs, they don't hear ultrasound. They hear sounds we don't hear. But we tend to call anything that's out of our perception ultra, or, not unnatural. This is something out of our very, very concrete world, and we call it unnatural. It's not unnatural. We are conditioned. By many factors, we are conditioned. Now, the thing is, can we remember that we are conditioned? Because if we can remember that we are conditioned, we can connect to the curiosity, the flexibility, and the humility that comes with it, rather than to the certainty, the arrogance, and the rigidity that comes with certainty. In my book, certainty and rigidity is a synonym of, lack of growth, of stagnation, while curiosity, flexibility, humility is typical of a child and is the synonym of growth and learning. So I want to move into the second piece of this presentation on how all these filters and conditionings that we have created for ourselves, how do they show up in a conversation? Let's assume that we are conversational beings, language beings. So therefore, we live in language and we live in conversation. So imagine a typical conversation that could happen at work. This is very common in many of our clients around the world, that you have a disagreement with a colleague. So let's look at an example that can illustrate what I'm saying. How would a conversation with a colleague be when you are connected to that filter of certainty, arrogance, lack of curiosity, the typical education that we have had all along, that we are supposed to know the answers? So let's say we come out of we just had a meeting with a client, and we have agreed on a project, but something was not going well. I could see the body language of my colleague. He was really restless, and we come out, and as soon as we step out the door, she looks at me and says, I can't work with you when you undermine me all the time. So I am also coming out of that filter of certainty and arrogance, will respond to her, well, I didn't mean to undermine you. You're being too sensitive. Rings a bell? Well, it happens. It's pretty common. Maybe you can picture your own conversations. So then she says, well, you should have watched yourself with a client, as you immediately accepted the price reduction. You made me look stubborn. Well, you were being a nice guy. Then I say, look, I wasn't trying to be the nice guy. We were about to lose a deal. The client was clearly frustrated about the price, and you were making it worse through your inflexibility. So now things are going, getting worse and worse with my colleague. So then she says, well, now you're adding insult to injury. I was not upsetting the client. And then I have this, like, a light goes on, and I say, well, I think we both need to slow down. We may have an opportunity to learn from this. And then my colleague says, okay, let's talk about it. All right? But then, let me show you like an internal conversation that was going on inside of me. And this conversation, because I was being so certain and arrogant, I was not sharing with my colleague. So this is what I was thinking and feeling, but not sharing with her. I was thinking, how can you be so blind? We were going to lose the deal. And then when I say, I didn't mean to undermine you, you're being too sensitive, I was thinking, I don't know how to work with you. You take everything personal. And then when she says, you should have watched yourself with the client, as you immediately accepted the price reduction, etc., I was thinking, how can you be so insensitive? We were 20 seconds away of being asked to leave because of your stubbornness. And then when I was saying I wasn't trying to be the nice guy, etc., I was thinking, I think it is a waste of time trying to explain this to you. You're obviously too arrogant to listen and less to understand. You can obviously see that this statement itself is pretty arrogant, right? And then when she says, now you're adding insult to injury, I was thinking, well, just like I thought, you are too arrogant to even listen. And then when I say, I think we need to slow down, I was thinking, I think this is going nowhere. Let me try to finish this conversation. And when she says, okay, let's talk about it, I'm thinking, I want to leave, not talk more with you. So typical conversation, right? Now let me try something different, and let me offer how this conversation could look like through the filter of curiosity and humility. I know this is going to sound obvious to you, but what's not obvious is to become the kind of person that can have this conversation. Can I remember that I have filters? Can I remember that I have distinctions and that I have not other distinctions? And then that I'm limited. And then if I can be in that place, I can enter the space of curiosity, and then it can show up in language in a totally different way. So imagine my colleague says, can we talk about what just happened? And then I say, of course, let's do like an after action review. And then my colleague says, I feel bad in the middle of the price discussion. You told the client you were happy to give a 10% price cut. Do you remember that part? And then I say, I do remember. Well, I'm sorry you felt bad. And I can see how my sudden intervention could lead you to believe I was being dismissive of your argument. I was considering everything you said very carefully at the same time. I was worried about how the conversation was turning out. And then she, because she is also in this place of curiosity and humility, says, I did not notice you were worried. What were you worried about? And then I tell her, I was reading a body language of real discomfort in the client. I thought we were about to lose a deal. Did you notice that too? And then she says, oh, I wasn't noticing that. Can you give me an example of what you noticed? And then I say, absolutely. He crossed his arms the moment he heard our price. He leaned back and stopped asking questions. It looked like he wanted to get over with the conversation. And then she says, how interesting. I noticed the same. And made up a story that he was trying to negotiate, but because he really wanted to do this project with us. And I made the assumption that staying put was the best strategy for us, not to sacrifice profit. And then I say, wow, same data, different stories. I think we have a lot to learn from each other for the future. So you see, the starting condition does not change. We just exit a conversation with a client where I offered a 10% discount, and my colleague did not think that was the right thing to do. But having this conversation from a place of curiosity and humility would allow me, in this case, to have this internal dialogue. So I'm happy to talk. It is as critical as selling the project that we build our own team. So when I say, let's do an after-action review, I'm thinking there are always things we could have done differently. I'm glad we have institutionalized this AAR process. So when my colleague says what she says, I felt bad, I'm thinking, I'm sorry I created the conditions for you not to be at your best. It was not my intention, but obviously something I did triggered you, and I'm sorry for that. That's my internal dialogue. And then when I say, I do remember, I'm thinking, I was worried for us that the team would lose a deal because of the pricing. And my truth is I was listening to you carefully, and I'm as interested in making the best profit as I know you are. And then when she says what she says, I was thinking, okay, here's an opportunity. We were obviously constructing different stories. And then I tell her the story, and I'm thinking, let me explain what I saw. I wonder what you saw. And then I'm curious about her. And then when she says what she says, yes, of course, it happens all the time. We watch the same set of data and draw different conclusions. And then, when I say absolutely, etc., says, well, let me share the facts I saw and the story I made up. And then when she said what she says, well, now I'm in for a big surprise. You saw the same data and made up a different story. I wonder if you could be right. Maybe I sacrificed margin for no reason. I need to reflect on this. So you see, the thing about being curious is that you might discover that the other person has a point. And then you have to think about it. And then, well, I think we have a lot to learn how we make up stories and draw conclusions. So different conversation, but the same starting point. So let me pause here And I would like to invite you to just make some notes in the chat space of your screen about, you know, filters, mindset, stories, which is the entering condition to the conversation. So what do you think about the conditions you create for yourself as you enter into any conversation? Let me pause here so you can make some notes in the chat space. Barbie, I don't know if you want to give some special instruction here.
Yeah, just to make sure that you send your chat to the organizer.
And Barbie, if you can read some of those comments, because I can't see them because I'm looking at my presentation.
So far, I haven't gotten any, so give it a few minutes.
Okay. We can always reflect together in the Q&A part too. So
yeah, so somebody in the Q&A put they shape what we can see around the mindset and filters.
Mm-hmm. Is that a question?
Another person says, interesting, how can we differently apply our filters?
Yes.
I agree with the last comment. So it looks like the chat function is not operating as we like. So you can put your responses in the question function, which seems to be working.
Okay. Well, let me move. And now I would like to you know, to offer that maybe some of the ideas that you were considering were a filter of curiosity and humility and flexibility creates empathy with the other person, deeper listening, intention to understand, etc. And again, if you look at the language that showed up in the conversation, this is the visible part of how the filters show up. What can you say about the language? How are the two languages, the language of certainty and the language of curiosity, different from each other? Let me give you a few seconds to make some comments if you wish. Well, let me move. And again, we can address it in the Q&A part. Maybe some of the ideas you were considering that differ one type of language from the other was the open questions, you know, versus closed questions, questions that don't have an opinion in them. They're not inductive questions. First person language, you know, people own their opinions. You are able to paraphrase and mirror back to the other person's satisfaction, so you show them you are listening and understanding, checking your ideas. I mean, what do you think? And then also body language, you know, it's more open, more leaning into the conversation versus leaning out or staying out and you know, across close body language. All right, so let me move into the last piece on how do we translate this into teams. As I said before, I believe teams are the main lever of accomplishing results in an organization, and we have found that high-performing teams have a blend of three things. First, at the impersonal level, they consistently achieve superior results that transcend the individual performance. So there's a synergistic effect here. The 1 + 1 equals 3, and they have a passion for exceptional results. So at the impersonal level, they have a lot to show. But then at the culture level, the relationships level, the we level of the team, the high performing teams, they have, you know, they love working and playing together. You can see them feeling joy and passion for the journey. And these teams, they embody the best of the organizational culture. And then at the individual level of the team members, uh, they allow for an expression of each team member's gifts and talents. And they also create a space of belonging and meaningful contribution. We believe in our philosophy, again, this is not the truth, this is just an idea, that in order to accomplish exceptional sustainable results, you have to accomplish success in the three dimensions, the it, the I, and the we dimension. If one of them is not present, the success might be exceptional and it will be very difficult to sustain. Now, and then again, in the teams that are incredibly outstanding high performance teams, they leverage the being level that we have been talking about today, and the doing level, which is how language shows up in a conversation, to to become aware of their own filters and to bring those filters into the conversations. So we work with teams across and around the world, and they all share the same principles. These conversations are different because they can access a different space before and during having those conversations. How do they manifest? They manifest in very concrete team operational agreements where they agree on behavioral stuff that they're going to honor as a team every day as they run their business, but that these very pragmatic and practical principles are a manifestations of the deeper values and the deeper stories that they want to honor as they work together. So, for example, they say we're going to ask questions to each other, we're not going to interrupt each other. Now, this might sound trivial and very superficial, yet it is a manifestation, as I said before, of these values where they want to manifest some filters, and they want to create a language that allows them to accomplish things that they could not accomplish before. And to end this presentation and move into the Q&A session section of the presentation, I want to stress once more that language is not a descriptor of things as much as it is a creator of realities. Just think about it. I hope that during this presentation you can at least entertain the idea that by creating or bringing a new language, a language of more distinctions and a language of more curiosity into our lives, we will be able to respond to the doing aspect of happiness, which is accomplished results that we wish for, that we desire, that we want to pursue. So that concludes my part of the webinar, the first part, and now comes the part where I would love to engage in a dialogue. So Barbie, can you explain the mechanism so we can move?
Yes, so I already have some questions that came up in the question section. So if you have any additional questions, please feel free to type them in. And the first question is, let me open it up. How do you suggest we recognize when we're straying from the witness eye?
When you stray from the witness eye? Yeah. That's a great question. Well, I think the best proxy to become aware of that space is whenever you feel attachment and whenever you feel the pull to hold on to an idea or to hold on to your perspective of things. That is an invitation to say, what is it here that is having me rather than I having a story? There's a big difference between you having a story. When you have a story, you have a choice to respond. When the story has you, you have no choice because you are the story. So the best proxy to connect to the witness eye is to realize that you are feeling the pull to become unconscious, So when you feel the pull to become unconscious, that is a moment of awareness. That is consciousness. So pay attention to that pull, and then you can have a choice. But if you go down the rabbit hole, like Alicia, then you don't have a choice.
Thank you, Richie. Next question. I agree stories shape our reality. How can we help others see theirs respectfully, especially in a high-performance culture? To say that's your story and you're believing in your story, you made it up, might be experienced as condescending.
Absolutely, absolutely. I do not recommend you to do that. So first, I would start by meeting people where they are. That is the main principle. And one of the principles that I was talking about, operational agreements for teams. One of the main principles is to offer any suggestion that you want to offer from a place of care and compassion. So you don't want to push something onto somebody, because that's not going to land well with anybody. So if you want to help people, first I suggest that you start role modeling a way of presenting your own stories that open up to inquiry from others. So you don't present your story as a finished product. You present your story as your story. You own it. You say it's your story, and then you say, look, guys, I have analyzed a set of data, and I have come to some conclusions that I believe are going to get us where we want to go. And I could be mistaken, because I have to acknowledge that I have been selective in the data I have chosen. So you could have different sets of data. You could have built a different story, and I'm happy to consider a different story, because the point here is not that we do what I'm suggesting, but that the team can learn together. So I have an opinion that if you start role modeling that story first yourself, then you can invite other people to, do you think there's a possibility that we could have a different interpretation? Are you willing to listen to another possible interpretation? But I would never tell somebody, well, that's your interpretation, you own it, that's not true, because that's going to create reactivity, and that's pretty not humble itself. You see, when you remember, this is a very nice principle that I like to keep in mind. When you judge somebody of being something, at that moment, you're becoming that something yourself. So, you know, when you tell somebody, oh, you're being arrogant, that's pretty arrogant itself. So think about it. So if you want to invite somebody into the space of humility, you have to role model humility first.
Thank you, Richie. And I think this question is related. This requires quite a bit of self-awareness. How do you involve a high-performance organization into the conversation that self-awareness is connected to high performance?
Great question. We talk about it. You know, normally I would not invite a team to engage in different types of conversations unless there is some business challenge that they are falling short of today. So normally I would start by finding a place of improvement where if they change the conversations, that would be good for the business. So we need a point of tension, you know, a certain gap of effectiveness to create the initial energy charge to start the journey. As we start the journey and we move into the conversations, they start to experience by themselves that having a different conversation totally changes the dynamic of the team, and it allows them to discover things that were totally invisible to them before. Just recognizing the power of the question, being able to pause and ask, oh, tell me more about that. You know, sometimes I'm in a team meeting and they all say, yes, we want to learn from each other, we want to ask more questions, but then, you know, they can't do it. The intention is there, but then the practice it's totally not there. So after 10 minutes I will raise my hand and say, guys, look, I mean, you have appointed me the gatekeeper of these operational agreements. We have been sitting here for 10 or 15 minutes. I have not heard one single question from you. How do you want to learn from each other? And you said you wanted to ask questions. So what do you want to do? And normally, that breaks the ice, and they will smile and they say, yeah, you're right, we did it again. Okay, so what do you want to do? And then they might decide, okay, nobody has a question to ask from any of the intelligent things that have been said here in the last 10 or 15 minutes. Oh, I have a question, and I have a question. Okay, ask the question. And then they ask the question, and the meeting takes a totally different turn. So it becomes deeper, more meaningful. Everybody becomes engaged. And then at the end of the meeting, we do an AAR, an after action review, and ask them, well, what do you think? How did the meeting go? And then from their experience, they say, oh, there is so much power in the question. And then, it becomes a pull rather than a push. This has to come from the inside out. It will never come from the top down. This is our experience working with teams. They have to buy into it. And you as a facilitator, as a coach, as a team member, can create the space for this to happen, but it has to happen by itself. You cannot make it happen. You can create the conditions for it to happen. Become like a catalyst, like an enzyme in the broth, but you cannot make it happen.
Thank you, Richie. Another question. Can you give an example of how you created this new language in an organization? What was the approach?
Yes. Well, we have many examples. Let me share just one example of a project we did with a pharmaceutical company based in Europe. They have a huge challenge in the R&D department, which is critical in a pharmaceutical company because they are the ones that create, the medicines that are launched in the market, and they had this huge task of launch 6 new medicines a year into the market, and they were not being able to accomplish that. So, and the characteristics of this R&D of a pharmaceutical company, imagine these very, very pragmatic scientists, double PhDs that were very good at, coming to conclusions by themselves, but very, very challenged to work collaboratively, to break silos, to listen to each other, to learn from each other. Imagine. So we did a program there that was totally based on these concepts of moving from certainty to curiosity and moving from blaming others to taking responsibility and taking ownership for your own ability to respond to the conditions. So we created a program there that was called the Learner Player Program, and we run the program through the whole R&D organization, and they called it Changing the Culture, one conversation at a time. We facilitated conversations between people, and they realized the power of the questions, the power of listening, the power of empathy, how empathy created a platform of trust, where when you had that platform of trust, you could take bigger risks because you knew the relationship was never at stake there. So when you know the relationship is solid and the trust level is solid, and you're going to hold my back and I'm going to hold your back, then we can take higher risks together. And it was an incredible success. It was based, I would say, on these two concepts: being a player in your life, and also being a learner rather than a knower. We call it a knower, the mental model of certainty and arrogance.
Another question, Richie, is how do you measure success?
Well, we have many ways of measuring success. Normally, when we go in to work with a team or with an organization, we suggest that they take a picture of the baseline of the culture so they can correlate it to the results of the business. And once we have that picture, which is, I'm not going to explain it here, I'm just going to say it has a quantitative and a qualitative aspect of it. We do like a diagnostic So you can measure the culture, how constructive the culture is, how defensive the culture is, how aggressive or passive the culture is. And then we can track that throughout the project through pulse checks, through doing interviews, people doing focus groups. And as we move along the transformation, you can correlate those to the business results. And normally there is a very high correlation of as soon as they start making decisions in a more constructive way, as soon as they start having better conversations, immediately you see how that starts to have ripple effects in the rest of the organization, and that translates into results. Of course, the translation into results is not a direct translation, and we have to work with the client so they can allocate a certain percentage of those improvement in results to the work on culture, because there could be other things. But normally, there's a huge payback of the project in culture, because teams, normally the senior teams that work on this, they make decisions of millions and millions of dollars, of euros every day. And with one good decision or with one optimal decision they make, thanks to the capacity that they learn to speak differently, to make different decisions, to hold each other accountable, one decision would pay for the whole investment. So I tend to suggest to them that they treat an investment in culture in the same way they would treat any other financial investment. This has to have a very, very high payback. If not, it's not worth doing. And success is measured, as I say, by success in the business. Ultimately, culture is an enabler so that the business can, pursue and execute the strategy impeccably. And when you pursue and execute your strategy, if you have a good strategy, so this does not, replace a bad strategy, but given that you have a decent strategy and you execute it in an impeccable way, then you can accomplish incredible results through culture, which is the connector between strategy and execution.
So how do I start a conversation about this with my leadership team, my organization?
How do you start a conversation?
Yes.
About this journey?
Implementing a program like this or starting a change journey?
Well, as I said before, Barbie, the way I would start a conversation is by, we have a first phase in any work we do, which is called holding up the mirror. I think it is very important, to take an initial a diagnostic, an initial picture snapshot of where the team is, if you're going to work with a team. So, understanding their gaps, understanding their aspirations, understanding their purpose, what they want to accomplish, where are they falling short of their aspirations. And then we do a diagnostic of all of that, and we inquire into the strengths of the team, into the opportunities of the team, and then we would present that report to the team, and we facilitate a conversation. So what is created during the conversation is when they look at the snapshot, they say, yeah, this is us, and I think we have a huge opportunity here or there, and we want to make this happen, and we want to become a better team. We want to become an outstanding team, a phenomenal team. I have a client that they want to move from from a great team that they are today to a phenomenal team. That's their aim today, and they're not yet phenomenal. So what do we need to do to become phenomenal? And then it becomes like a session where people start to get enthused and start to get inspired by doing something for their team, but they want to do it themselves. And then, you as a facilitator or as a consultant become an enabler of that is coming from the team. But the way I would start a conversation is by showing them the opportunity and asking them, would you like to do something different? Because, if you are happy with what you have, then my recommendation is you continue doing what you're doing. But many times, teams, what happens to teams is they want to accomplish something different by doing the same. And that does not work because, as Einstein said, if you do more of the same, you're going to get more of the same. You're not going to get something different by doing the same. that is the definition of madness. And, you know, we show it to them. And then they decide what they want to do. But it's a conversation where the outcome of the conversation is, okay, what do you guys want to do and how can we help you?
Thank you so much, Richie. There is no further questions. So this concludes today's session. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you one of our next webinars.
Well, thanks, everyone. Look forward to connecting with you again.
Take care. Bye-bye.